Welcome back to the UUR, a Severance podcast with your host, Kali Thomas, and myself, Rodnesha Green. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
We're excited to have you with us. It's not a bonus episode. It's part of our lineup, but is bonus content.
Yeah.
We are here for all the nooks and crannies of the Severed Floor. So we're not just going to take you through the episodes. We're going to take you through the extras too. Today, we are going to be looking at the Lexington Letter. This was a little Easter egg drop, and we timed it exactly after the previous episode because that's when it dropped in the original lineup. For the last two episodes, we got this nice little surprise in Apple Books, which subsequently made its way to everywhere else. But since Severance is an Apple TV show, it was introduced in Apple Books. But it was a free download of some bonus content to kind of help fill out the world of Lumon and Severance and all the things. So we thought it would be fun to take you guys through it. If you have not seen the Lexington Letter, read it, don't have time, we're going to make the time for you guys because that's how much we love you. Okay. We're willing to do the deep dives that you are unwilling to do. And you guys just get to sit back and learn and enjoy, hopefully. So that is what we are going to do today. Now, before we get into the breakdown of this, you know, we live in an era of the Easter egg and the post-credit scene and commentary and Redditors and everybody breaking things down to the max. And I just wanted to get your thoughts. Are you pro the post-credits? Like, do you like the extras? Because I know there's people out there that are like, oh, I wish they would just make the film or the show or whatever. Why does it have to be extra things? And then there's some people that love it. So where do you stand on that?
I don't know that I've ever experienced an Easter egg like this, that is like additional content that you feel like you have to read to get some insight to the show. But in general, like Easter eggs that are like fun nods to things within a TV show or a movie, sure, why not?
Now, are you for the post-credit scenes? Because not only has Marvel kind of changed the game in that for films, but now we're starting to see it with TV shows too.
Yeah.
Pro, con.
I mean, yeah, it's just still part of the show. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird question to me, I guess, because I watch all of that stuff. I'm like, are there people who don't like it?
Yes.
What?
There are.
Weird.
I mean, I guess I'm neither here nor there for it. I will say I am used to it with Marvel. Like, I anticipate that anything Marvel will have a post-credit scene, will have Easter eggs, will have extra stuff, blah, blah, blah. I'm still getting into the mindset of it appearing in other things that aren't superhero-related properties or Marvel DC, like, because now it's starting to show up in other properties too. Case in point, the current season of Rick and Morty. Every episode has a post-credit scene. They didn't used to do it every episode.
Yeah, not every episode, but they've done it.
But this season, they're doing it every episode. And I, as soon as the credits hit, turn it off. And then I find out later, oh, there was an extra scene. I didn't know. I'm not mad at it, but it's still taking some getting used to expect it from all these different mediums.
I guess I've always been a credit watching person anyway. So I don't often miss them, even if I'm not expecting it.
Gotcha. See, I am not. And, you know, that just goes to show me as an actor, I don't respect all the people that put their effort into making these properties and films and movies. I'm so sorry. But I just, once the story's done, so am I.
Yeah. You know, that's something we've always done. I don't know. My mom and I go to the movies like it's our church. Since the pandemic, not as often, but every week almost. And I just remember being a kid with her, like reading funny sounding names from the credits. And that was just like always like part of the movie experience. That was just always like fun for me. So we always ended up staying and watching everything. I think that's how that started.
I mean, I'll do it a handful of times, but it's definitely not part of the ritual. I know you guys are there for the trailers. You guys are there for like the snacks and popcorn well before. I'm like the person that's like, oh no, I'm 5 minutes late, but I still want to stop and get my snacks. Guess I'm going to miss those trailers. Getting somewhat better at it. But for some reason, I do love when there's additional reading materials. Does that make sense? I think because with films and movies, there's only so much that you can show because, you know, relegated to a time limit. I like when you get reading material because I feel like you get more time and leeway to flesh things out.
Yeah, I don't do any of that. So yeah, I think that's probably why I ended up not reading this. So like when this came out, Rodnesha was like, have you seen the Lexington Letter? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she sent it to me. Life happened and I didn't read it. But I was like, who got the time to sit down and read something extra? I just want to watch the show. See, if this had been a bonus episode of them talking about it,
you would have watched it.
Like, you know, a bonus scene, I would have just watched it. So, sidebar, I waited until after rewatching Defiant Jazz to read it since I hadn't read it anyway. I
Mhm.
was like, let me read the order that it should have been. So, I didn't read that until this week. So, if you are watching Severance for the first time and you've gotten to this point and you still haven't watched the last two episodes, you should read the letter before you watch the last two episodes because it's definitely going to color them differently.
Agree. So as you already said, I did read the letter the first time. I got so excited because I think after the episode in the original airing, there was just a little blurb that was like, go read the Lexington letter after the show in Apple Books. And I was like, the what? And so I immediately went on there, found it, and was just like, oh, bonus content. I love it. And I sat there and like thumbed through it. Now, I didn't do the deep dive that we're about to do today, but it definitely helped fill out the world a little bit more, answered some questions, raised some more questions.
Yeah.
I just like that the creators were thinking ahead to this and being like, you know what? For the people that are into the show, I feel like they will appreciate this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if anyone else is a fan out there and doesn't appreciate this. Maybe you don't. That's fine. But I feel like this is the type of show where people are looking for the extra things and looking in the background for things and trying to piece together the puzzle.
Yeah.
So this is a fun little step in that direction. But yeah, so today, guys, we are going to cover the Lexington Letter. It's not really a summary breakdown for this because we're just going to go through it little by little, but just to abbreviate it, essentially what happens is someone writes into a reporter. Apparently they work in MDR at a Lumon campus somewhere else. And they're kind of like, stuff is getting weird. I wanted to share this with somebody in case this means anything. So here's what I know. Mm-hmm. And that is the most abbreviated summary I can give you. But we're going to go through it all. So trust you will get the insights. You can read along as you're listening to this if you like. You could just listen to this or read ahead. And that way, when we bring stuff up, you'll already know your choice. But here we go.
So we're introduced by the letter first by an email. So we see an email from Daria Thorne, who is a reporter for the Topeka Star. We don't know Topeka where yet, but later on, I do believe Kansas gets mentioned. And she's writing an email to Jim. There's no sign off or a full name for Jim, but it's presumably her editor because she's like pitching a story. And she says, I've received this email with a letter from a severed Lumon former employee and scans of an employee handbook. It's got some really strange stuff in it, but I'm wondering if we should look into this story. And then for timeline check, this is dated November 10th is when the letter is addressed to her. And then she sent email to her editor on the 12th. So she's read this all, she's digested it. And now she's like, we should do this story on this.
So, I mean, you already mentioned the Topeka thing. That was the first thing that I saw that I was like, the Topeka Star. And I immediately thought Topeka, Kansas, because that's the most known one. But then I was like, are there other Topekas? Because they don't say where. And I did look it up. There is a Topeka, Kansas. There's a Topeka, Mississippi, Indiana, Illinois, and there's a Topeka in Zambia. So
interesting.
Could be like, any of them.
The Simpsons in Springfield. Like, which Springfield are they in?
So I did note that because I was like, oh, I'm going to have to be on the lookout to see. Because again, I'm obsessed with the geography. We've already heard. I'm still trying to figure out where PE is. If you've been listening to our other episodes, I just want to get a lay of the land. It just helps me, but they're keeping it very nebulous.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that stood out to me is we do see that the email address says Jim M. And my brain goes ping, ping, ping. I was like, who do we know that has an M in their name? Now, again, this is Topeka, so may not have anything to do with anything. But I was just like, Jim Milchick, maybe. Could not be it at all. But that was just the first thing I saw. And I was just like, okay. I'm going to just file that away in my little brain. I guess we can move on to the attached letter. So in this first portion, I think from like pages 2 to 3 or 1 through 3 of this little book, it's the letter from Peg Kincaid. So this is who's writing into Daria Thorne about her experience. She opens by saying that she's writing on behalf of a friend, Peggy K. Now, we all know this is clearly her innie.
Yeah.
And she also says that Peggy K is no longer with us.
Yeah.
The opening line is like, I'm writing on behalf of my friend Peggy K, who is no longer with us. Maybe it's strange to call her my friend, but that's how I think of her. Depending on how much you know about Lumon and what they do, maybe you already know what I mean. So She specifically mentions that she's writing to Daria because Daria's already done some coverage on a story.
Yeah.
It says a Dorner truck
The Dorner
incident.
truck incident. We don't. At first, you're like, "What the heck is that?"
Yeah.
And it gets explained later.
And they don't say, what the Dorner truck incident is. It's just that a story that she covered, clearly due to how she covered it or what the content of the incident is. Peg felt like she would be a reliable source to send this to. So she goes on to, as she says, give some color commentary on who she is. She makes sure to let her know, which is interesting, that she did not choose to go to the cops with her story because Lumon apparently has connections to the police force and City Hall, at least where they are or where she is. So she didn't trust that. And something about the way the story was covered by Daria makes her feel like a trustworthy source. So that's all we know at this point. But some of the highlights of the color commentary that we get over the next few pages, Peg mentions that she is currently on the run, essentially. She says she's staying in a hotel. She thinks she's being followed. So whatever it is that she knows or wants to share must be of some importance to someone.
Yeah, she's basically like prefacing the rest of the story with that because she's like, I just need to get it out in case I don't have a chance to talk about it with anybody else.
And it's interesting the way it's written too. At various points, she'll be like mentioning how she was scared by something or she heard a noise or she's been jumpy or very nervous. And, some of that could just be for us as readers, but some of it may also be if you're just thinking of the character, like, I just need you guys to understand that I truly believe that I'm being followed. This isn't just like, I want attention.
I'm trying to stay focused and get this written out, but I can't because everything is scaring me.
So she goes in to talk a little bit more about her history. So apparently for Peg, she used to be a school bus driver. She worked, I think, for 12 years, I think it says.
Yeah.
With this elementary school, Clover Elementary. She said she loved her job. She was very happy with it. And the only reason that changed is because there was an incident where she got into an accident while driving the students. She hit a patch of black ice, drove the bus into the ditch. No one got hurt. However, her job basically put all the blame on her, kind of came for her, didn't give her any grace or leeway in it just being an accident. So it clearly, and I guess for being 12 years in, kind of gave her a blow to her confidence. It's like, I've worked with this school district or whatever bus system for this long. People just literally threw me under the bus as soon as something went wrong. And so she starts considering looking for another job. And she said she just didn't feel the joy that she had.
And part of this is during the bus incident, they had to sit on the ice, in the ditch for a couple hours. And then it was protocol that another bus come pick up the kids and she stay there until the repair people come. So then she was on the bus by herself waiting. So it's an ordeal. The heat is out, it's snowy, it's cold. She's done what she needs to do to protect the children. And now she's just sitting there can't believe this happened. And then she hears on the radio a very vague commercial from Lumon. And she's recognizes Lumon, but is I didn't know they had a office here in Topeka. That's interesting. They're advertising for a job and they're not really saying what the job is. So then later that night, when she's deciding that she probably needs to start looking for other jobs because her job was you were driving recklessly, blah, blah, blah. She thinks about Lumon again. And she says that she just found herself driving and happened upon a building she hadn't seen before and thought this must be the new Lumon. And without thinking, she goes inside to inquire about the job. Very interesting. She was drawn there.
Yeah, that's true. We also get kind of a timeline on her age. So she mentions that because she said she got the nickname baby driver when she started there because she was the youngest school bus driver in their fleet. But she says that she was already 50 at that point.
Yeah.
So if 12 years has gone by, I'm going to say she's around 62. So it's kind of interesting for her to be making a job transition like this so late in life to something that is very nebulous and unclear. But she does go in, she applies, and basically they get the ball rolling.
And the big selling point was that she was going to be making more than double what she was making as a bus driver. So she was like, well,
I love what she said there too, time out. I'm doing all this labor as a bus driver for children and all I got to do is go in here and file some stuff and I can get twice the pay.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Right.
And I found that an interesting kind of commentary, I think, from the writer of just how some of these corporate jobs just bring you in. You don't really know what you're doing. It doesn't really make sense what you're doing all the time, but they're like, here's money. And then we have these very practical jobs that, like you said, are essential and things that we need. And people are just like, what's the minimum we can pay this person and not be douchebags?
Yeah, she likes what they're selling her. She signs up on the spot. And then she goes on to kind of describe her beginning life at Lumen and kind of like her daily routine. She describes that she would get there, go to her locker, change out of her outsize clothes, which I think is interesting because what we've seen of the show so far is they come ready, dressed to work. But in her account, she changes out of clothes, changes into her Lumen neutrals, which is the dress code with no labels, tags, patterns, words, any of that. And she describes like it was just day in, day out, same thing for 2 years before she had any incident. And then the interesting stuff starts happening.
Oh, by the by, we did get our first Kansas reference, but for some reason I missed it the first time through reading it. But she mentions that she got through a few semesters at Kansas State. So I guess that's like, okay.
Yeah, I was like, I forget where, but I know it does mention Kansas.
See, I missed that reference and I caught the one at the very end with her phone number. And I was like, oh. So she's bought into Lumen. It is interesting that you note, the way that they let them change there. I wonder why that is. Why not just come dressed?
Yeah, but we don't know yet, right? We don't have exact years for where we are now in the Lumen timeline.
We do not.
But later on in this, they make changes that lead you to believe that this is earlier days. So there's probably procedures that have changed over time, right? And this might be one of them just for efficiency's sake. Like, why are they wasting time changing if they have to stagger people's entries and stuff?
Right.
Yeah. So then the interesting connection starts. So one day out of the blue, she's leaving like she normally does. And she feels something in her pocket and she pulls out a note. And at first she doesn't recognize it. It's a series of symbols. And then she stares at it for a little while. It slowly starts coming back to her. She realizes this is a letter written in, quote, Puglish. And sidebar, Peg is a very rambly person. She says she gets rambly when she's nervous, which is interesting that you're rambly in a letter because you can edit that out, but she chooses not to. And so she rambles on and gives some backstory about her and her sister, how they're not close anymore, but they used to be really close. They were born only 11 months apart, and they created this symbol system, this language that they called Puglish, that they used to write notes back and forth together with. And it was essentially just a symbol that they inserted for each letter of the alphabet, and then they wrote the symbols instead of the letters. And so she's realizing that her innie must have subconsciously remembered this Puglish and written this note to her. So she's suddenly like, I've spent all this time not even thinking about my innie at all, and now I'm suddenly like forced to think about her, and it throws her for a loop.
Yeah. It's funny when they got to the part where she was like, me and my sister were 11 months apart. I was like, oh, my nieces.
Yeah.
They're like them, little Irish twins. Sidebar, I need to look up, where did that saying come from, Irish twins? When did we decide that that's what kids who are like less than a year apart are? Oh, wait, I think I understand. Oh, okay, well, that's kind of racist. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking.
Assume because they say Irish people do that a lot, I guess.
I think that's, yeah. It just, all of that just like shoo shoo in my brain. I was like, oh, I was like, I understand now.
Rodnesha.
Oh, I understand now. Okay. But yeah, so like you said, she's forced to having to reconcile to it. And we get the letter from her and she decides to write her back.
Well, the letter says, basically, it's the kind letter. It's not like, I think because we had already seen like Helly be so combative and whatnot, I assumed it was going to be negative, but it was just like, hey, I'm your innie. I don't know if this is even going to work, or, I don't want to get
she's
you.
Like, right.
But, I just want to know, like, what's it like up there, kind of thing. It's very innocent. She's like, I mean no harm.
Like you said, it is a stark contrast between Helly because she does approach it like, oh, I might get her in trouble, or, oh, she may not want to talk to me, or she's very trepidatious, which is interesting since Peg says she's kind of nervous and anxious, and her innie clearly has the same inclinations of like, oh, should I do this? I don't know, but I'm curious, but I don't want to get her in trouble and I don't want her to be mad at me, and da-da-da. So it reads very much in the same personality set. The main things that she brings up in this letter is like you said, she wants to know what it's like on the outside. She asks, why do I exist in the first place? And then she says, why does one choose to get severed?
Yeah.
It's funny how much this question comes up for the innies. And I'm sure because their life and their conditions don't seem humane nor rational for all the little that they know about the outside world and what life is really like. They seem to understand very clearly this kind of living does not make sense. To not know one day from another, to not get to sleep, to not get to see any other environments, this doesn't seem right. So that seems to be a common question for all the innies. I'm sure if they could ask their outies, it's like, why did you do this? Why?
Right. Yeah. So then Peg does write her back, says a little bit about herself, and she asks her, well, what do you do there? What's the job we do? Peggy writes back again and explains MDR, but I say she explains MDR, but she explains it to the best that she can, right? Because we know the people in MDR don't really know what they're doing anyway. But she does say she has 3 coworkers, so we know MDR is also 4 people here in Topeka.
Oh, did we mention, by the way, she says, I think when Peg is talking about getting her letter, she does mention, number one, that Peggy is a name that she hasn't gone by since she was in elementary school. So
Yes.
again, there's a lot of indicating of the childness
Yes.
of all this and how they're
And
treated like children.
She even says that she was told, which this is new information for us. Peg says that she was told her innie would be childlike because of the lack of experiences that they've had, which I thought was interesting because we've just assumed that is why they're like that, but they straight up told her this is what it would be like.
Right. But here's the thing is they don't tell them, obviously, we're going to treat them like children. It's one thing for them to be like, oh, we don't know a lot and we have to like kind of catch you up. It's like, no, you're going to not know a lot and we're going to keep it that way. And we're going to treat you like you're 5. But yeah, so she says that about the name. And then she also, this is what we mentioned earlier, she does also mention that the code detectors are a fairly new technology. Yeah. So she says a lot like, I don't know if you're even going to get this letter. They tell us there's code detectors. I'm not sure how they work. I don't know if this will get through. So clearly at this point, however the code detectors work, they haven't, I think, refined it to the point that maybe we are going to see in the show. It's still kind of nebulous. We still don't really know how the code detectors work. We're told they're very sophisticated, but who's to say?
Right.
There's another thing that comes up later in the letter that points to the detectors too, that points us back to Petey, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Yeah. So Peg decides to reach back out to Peggy, right? Because she's curious about why she feels certain ways at the end of certain days. And she's wondering what goes on in there. Cause she's like, some days I'll feel great when I come home. Some days I feel like I've been through some things, and some days, and I don't know what's happening that's causing me to feel like that. So that's kind of her impetus.
Yeah. Peggy tries to explain the numbers and the feeling, and it's the way Peg describes it. It's like just as confusing to her as it is for like Helly on her first day when Dylan and Mark are trying to explain it to her. It's like, okay, you guys are saying this like it's supposed to make sense, but it just doesn't make sense. And she also describes some of the perks they get for completing their files. And Peg is like, points out like this is another thing that's infantilizing, like seems like they're treating them like children. You get an Ellen party or a what? Like, she's like, I don't quite get what they're doing there. Anyway, they end up going back and forth for about 3 to 4 weeks. And she says it's like speaking to a childlike version of herself. It's very strange. It's like she feels like she has to keep doing it. She's learning more about her, but she's also like filling herself in. Like, it's very interesting. And during these back and forths, Peggy does mention the break room, but never goes into detail. But Peg can tell that it's something scary. So I think she wants to try to push and figure out what that is too. So she's like, what is going on? It seems like the more information I get, just the more questions I have.
Right. When Peg is kind of reading through Peggy's letter, I took note of her saying that her recall of things is like a foggy window. And this one paragraph seemed interesting to me when she was describing it. She said, it wasn't always me drilling her, though. She also asked me things too. And over again, I was beside myself with how much it felt like I was talking to a kid version of myself. She wanted to know everything about outside life, like what it felt like to be drunk or asleep. I'd never thought about it before, but she'd never been asleep. So I do all that on the outside. Or to fall in love. That one was a toughie to answer. Just ask my ex-husband. Or to have someone you love die. It was strange to see how the procedure filtered her knowledge. She knew what beer was, but couldn't name a specific brand. She knew she lived in the Americas, but she couldn't draw a map of it to save her life. She knew that movies exist, but not who David Niven was, despite him being by far my longest standing crush. It was like she had only seen the vaguest shape of the world through a foggy window. So, and we've been talking about that over the last few episodes too, of just like, how does this chip decide what to keep and what to retain, or what to toss and what to retain?
And also, what is the point, like you bring up? So, like, why does she need to know what beer and snow are to do her job at MDR?
Right?
Why does she know what they are in the first place? It's very interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, this whole foggy window view of the world seems interesting to me because it's like, why do they need to have any understanding of the outside world?
Right.
If they're just there to work, like, don't get it. There has to be a reason for it. I hope.
Well, and then the only reason we get up until this point is in that pilot script where they explain, as part of that explanation of severance, they do say it's to keep a conversational knowledge so you can have conversations with your coworkers, I guess.
But why is that important?
Because they aren't making them robots, I guess. I think maybe they can't make them robots.
Well, this just came to me too, because I'm thinking about, and we'll see it when we get to the manual, but they do specify how, at least in MDR, that they have been picked for their emotional intelligence. So I guess maybe it's like, okay, they can't be complete automatons because then they won't be able to access any of their EQ. And we need that for whatever this work is that they're doing. So I guess we need to keep them somewhat social, even though we've limited their understanding. It's just so bizarre. Like,
yeah,
I get it. It must have something to do with these numbers and what they're doing. They need to be able to keep an emotional intelligence of some sort, but it's just so weird. Anyway, maybe it'll all make sense what we know what these numbers mean.
Oh man, this freaking numbers. But we get an interesting hunch for these numbers at this turning point in Peg's letters between her and Peggy, a theory that I had not thought of yet. We've had a lot of theories.
I did, but I kept it to myself because I had read the letter and you hadn't.
You had the letter, but I hadn't. So she gets a note from Peggy one day. It's Friday, November 3rd, and Peggy writes to her. She's so excited. She finished sorting the Lexington file, and she said she finished at 2:30 p.m. and she earned a melon party, but she was so excited to tell that she barely could even stay to enjoy her melon party. She had to write the note and get it out and to tell Peg. She was so proud. Again, Peg is like, melon bar party, what the heck? And later at home, Peg sees a news report by Daria Thorne about a truck from Dorner Therapeutics getting blown up in New York at 2:32 p.m. And she notes that Dorner Therapeutics is one of Lumon's top competitors. And she is putting together, like, wait a minute, this happened almost only 2 minutes after my innie completed her file with these numbers that we don't know what they do. And it's interesting that she says the times, because I was thinking, like, okay, if this is Topeka, Kansas, this truck blew up in New York, the times are different. I wonder if she thought about it for a while and had to do some time change math in her head. Because those aren't in the same time zones, right?
That's true. Yeah, Kansas is central.
Yeah. But she was like, what the heck? And the coverage of the story said 6 people died. A lot of devices were destroyed. Prototypes for things were destroyed, formulas and things. There was no sign of a terrorist attack, no clues to any people. It looked like corporate espionage because of the things that were destroyed. And she was just, she starts putting together, like, oh my gosh, what if this is what we're doing at Lumen? We're like pinpointing targets and setting off bombs. So she's terrified. And so she decides that she's going to write more notes and try to get more information about Lexington, the file. And Peggy's just kind of like, they give us the file, we sort the numbers, the file's done. If we run out of time, we run out of time. That she did mention that before, like, you don't always finish the file. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And then we get another file and she's not getting any information. And finally she writes a note saying her theory. And she's like, I think there's something very sinister going on. Please don't sort any more numbers, regardless of the consequences. Like, just don't do it. And then she stops getting notes from Peggy and starts freaking out, of course, until one day Peg emerges from Lumen with wet hair and a note about what does she say? She says
I wrote it down. She had a visually comedic but painless mishap with the water cooler.
Yeah. So she gets like one of those notes that Mark gets trying to explain why she's coming out not the way she entered. And she's like, what the F is going on there? Like, this makes no sense. Really? My hair is wet from an event with a water cooler?
Now,
what?
Here's a question. I was going to bring this up last episode too, but then I was like, no, we haven't gotten to the letter yet when we talked about Mark's knuckles. One, do you think she would have thought twice about it had she not already clued into this incident with the Dorner truck stuff?
I think she would have, because that's such a weird situation and their explanation does not provide any explanation. I think it's even, to me, that's even weirder than like coming out with a bump or something, with a bump or a scrape. Like, your hair is soaking wet? Why is your head wet? It's in the office. That doesn't make sense.
Also, they didn't think through to like have this woman dry her hair before leaving for the day.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of dumb, because that is something that's really like, okay, how do you explain that?
Right. Yeah.
I would have these. Okay, sidebar. Lumon, whoever's running all of this any outie business, whoever's writing up these excuses, doesn't think through logistically questions that people on the other side may have. Maybe they're just hoping everyone will just be like, okay. But I'm like,
right.
Better idea. You came into contact with something that irritated your face and we had to wash the toxins off of you, blah, blah, blah. You're fine. You're good. But unfortunately, we had to like wet your face and hair and here's your Murray's gift card or whatever. But like, I don't know, just something else that makes more dang sense. Or could be there was a leak in the ceiling. Unfortunately, one of the panels came down over your desk and got you all wet. I don't know, like anything else, but you had a visually comedic. Also, the fact that they said visually comedic but painless mishap with a water cooler. Is this a cartoon? Like what? Right. what?
Everybody was laughing at your clumsy butt. Like what?
That just seems silly. So clearly they must have waterboarded the girl. I'm presuming, that, but you didn't think to like cut it off an hour before she's got to go and say, hey, go dry your hair. We left a blow dryer for you in the thing. You better use it so you can clean yourself up before you go home for the day. Or just make somebody do it. I mean, what if they've already got them in the break room?
I know, right? Just blow dry her hair first. Yeah, very interesting. But then it brings us back to our discussion during the last episode where, we're talking about Mark's knuckles. And it's like, okay, so they're definitely doing different things to different people at different times for different reasons in the break room. It's not all the same. Mm-hmm. And later, when we get to the handbook, they do say the consequence will match the severity of the offense.
Man, wait till we get there, because I had some things to say about that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, she goes back to work. She emerges again. And this time, as she's leaving the severed floor, she notices something stiff in her waistband. And she like hurries to get to her car to open it up. And it is a booklet. And it's the Macro Data Refiners Orientation booklet. And on it, written in, she's like, in the King's English, is a note from Peggy that says, they found your note. They're upgrading the code detectors, but the code detectors are down today, basically, while they're upgrading them. So that's how she was able to get that out. Not only a regular written note, but a whole book.
Homegirl took advantage of that day. This was the thing that I saw that made me wonder if that's potentially how PD snuck out the things that he snuck out. Like, it seems like again, we don't know how long ago this was, how often this happens with the code detectors when they go down for maintenance, but apparently there are times when it happens. Now, here's what's funny to me is I'm like, did they make an announcement that the code detectors were down for maintenance? How did she know? If they were down, you would think that you wouldn't tell anybody.
That they wouldn't tell them.
So nobody tries anything.
Yeah, it had to be a situation where they saw people working on things, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe someone just like overzealous in their like, haha, we caught you, punishing her, was like, and that's why we're going to update them. So you'll never be able to do it. And so she was like, oh, well, they must be working on it. I don't know why they didn't do it in the middle of the night, like they upgraded these MDR doors.
Right.
They should have done it that way.
Anyway, she did it. That's fine. But that made me wonder too, if maybe PD had some kind of insight of when like the servers for the code detectors get updated, and maybe he knew like, okay, I can sneak this tape out from this time to this time, or
he got lucky and like capitalized on the opportunity.
But her note. Oh, I wanted to talk about this too. Her note said, duly found your last note, been in the break room, don't know how long, think you're right about Lexington. Lumon updating code detectors, but they're down today. Hope this booklet gives clarity. Be careful. I love you too.
Yes.
Have they described Dooley yet? Was that on a
No, so that's the first, right? So we get a hint like, okay, Dooley must be the Grainer, right? Mm-hmm. There's another mention of somebody who is the equivalent to Milchek and now I can't remember where it was. But you're kind of seeing, here's their handler, here's their security person. The setup is the same. Mr. Dooley, a pale little man with a terrifying smile, was watching her more closely than usual. She described seeing him at the far end of a hall when she'd leave for the day, just standing there smiling, like he knew what I was doing, but wanted to play with me a while before dragging me to the break room.
There it is.
And that's where she said, I asked her what the break room was, but she never told me. Despite the forbidden nature of our whole interaction, this seemed to be a specific topic she was afraid to broach. So this happens even earlier on when they're writing all those letters back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah, where she's like, I think he's on to me.
So yeah, that was something that I thought was interesting. Like, do they intentionally hire these guys who kind of like have a serial killer vibe going on? Like,
right. Like, yeah.
Like, you know, Grainer's kind of pasty pale. He's not tiny, but he's not a brooding, big, you know, scary man.
But his face is scary.
Right. So I was like, is that like the formula for lead security person? Like hire someone who looks like this.
But yeah, so she goes through this book. She tries to figure it out. She attaches this book also with the letter and is explaining to Daria, you can try to figure this out. I think it's a fool's errand. Like, it's all just more confusion to me. But she decides to write Peggy back one more time. And she just says, are you okay? And she describes, she's like, I know she's okay because I'm physically okay. So I know at least that much, but like, don't know what's going on kind of thing. So she takes that note down with her. She emerges back in the elevator. She looks at her watch. It's only been 10 minutes. And there's a note back saying, leave now, get somewhere safe. They will try to follow. And she leaves, calls. Oh, that's where another person is mentioned. Hold on. Where does she?
While you're looking for that, can I just mention the funny description of Peg when she's looking through the manual and she sees Sevy? She says,
yeah.
I opened the booklet and was startled to find an eerily chipper creature smiling up at me from the page. He looked, pardon my indelicacy, like a little dildo with translucent skin, revealing a spiral-shaped digestive tract leading down to his anus. After reading his intro, I learned that this was Sevy, a personified severance chip, and the internal mascot Lumon uses to train its innies. I will never be able to unsee that.
Right. The way she described it and then getting to the handbook later and seeing it is so funny. But yeah, so sorry, the full last letter is leave now, get somewhere safe. They will try to follow. Nothing they say is real. Distribute the training booklet. Answers are there if you look. Thank you for my life. You were the best part of it. I'll be with you always, Peggy K, which is so sad. And then Peg says that she left immediately and she called Mr. Alvarado. So this is like the equivalent of Milchek, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Quit on the spot. And then she left Topeka without returning home. So she didn't even go back to her house. She went somewhere, we don't know where she's writing from for her safety, and checked into a hotel. And here we are. But she's just like, you know, I wish I could talk to Peggy again, but the only way to do that is to go back there, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to her. It's not safe. Like, so she's just suddenly left with this like child version of herself dead and no more answers. And she thinks she's being followed.
It's wild that she was that shook to just not even go home, like not pack a bag. She just was like, I'm leaving town. I'll figure it out. That's pretty crazy and pretty severe. So at this point, it goes back to Daria and Jim having the back and forth, right? Like, she presented all this to him. He responds to her and he basically is like, it sounds kind of bunk. Doesn't really, you know, add up. She seems like a disgruntled employee. I have a source that I trust implicitly at Lumon, and it sounds like she just got let go for too many absences. So Jim's pretty dismissive. He's just kind of like, I don't think it's really all the hype. Let's just have you focus on these basketball games for the local high school team, their playoffs, and let's just do what we originally planned to do. So he doesn't even entertain it. He doesn't even think like, oh, you might have something there. He's just like, shut it down. Nope, this is dumb. I already checked into it. Sounds like it's a fake, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Daria doesn't seem so easily convinced. So she's just like, are you sure? I could do both stories. This seems like it'd be pretty interesting if it turns out all the allegations are true. So she's invested. And by the by, this is all happening on the same day. It's November 13th. So it's a day later when he responds, and they're just having this back and forth on the 13th. So he responds back to her. I think like how much time has passed? Not much.
Yeah.
It's like 10 a.m. on the last letter from her back to Jim. And then by 1:03 that afternoon, he's like, too late. Just saw this from Carol over in Obits. And it's an obituary that says Margaret Peg Kincaid, 54. Hold on. 54?
That doesn't make sense, right? If
That
she
doesn't make
started
sense.
her job as a bus driver at 50.
50.
Maybe she was just mentioning that she was in her 50s.
Or maybe
Like,
she was saying like when they named her that she was 50. But she said she's been a bus driver for 12 years too. So were you?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe she was in her 40s when she started, and that's when they named her. And then she's like, I'm only 50 now, and I'm still one of the youngest. Maybe that's what
But
she
that
meant.
still doesn't make sense because 4 years would have passed if she was 50 when she wrote it.
Right.
Anyway, whatever.
Had to be 40, then 52, and then she's been at Lumon for 2 years. Yeah.
Okay.
But also she was stressed. She's being followed. Maybe she got some numbers wrong when she wrote it. She was stressed the F out.
Well,
but yeah,
either way, she was 54. It says Peg Kincaid passed away from complications from a car accident on November 11th. She is survived by her sister, Meryl Rasmussen of Tacoma, Washington, and a group of supportive, loving friends throughout the Topeka, Kansas area, a dedicated school bus driver for several decades. Peg enjoyed bridge, spy novels, gardening, cats, and David Niven films. She will be missed by all who knew her. A memorial service will be on November 20th at 10 a.m. in lieu of flowers. Please consider a donation to the Topeka Humane Society. So it does not mention that she worked for Lumon.
Yep. They don't want any signs of that
at all.
And she was absolutely correct about being followed, right? Because she died the very next day after sending Daria this letter. Daria wouldn't have even had a chance. Had Jim said yes, Daria would have even had a chance to find her, contact her back, and ask her questions. She was already dead by the time she asked Jim to look into this story.
Also interesting, he waited a day to respond. So did he give Lumon a heads up to be like, hey, this girl knows what's going on and she just wrote my reporter and you guys need to take care of it?
Well, yeah. And he says he checked with Lumon. So it's kind of like, do we believe what the conversation was? Do we believe the conversation was just him asking about the reliability of this? Or do we think he was warning Lumon?
Right.
Because we think Lumon's reach is, at least in Kier, we think it's all over the city. So might be the same for Topeka, Kansas.
Right. Because even though she sent it to Daria on the 10th, what if he's surveilling emails for all his employees and he pings about Lumon? I wouldn't be surprised. And so he gets that on the 10th, gives someone a heads up, and she's gone by the 11th. I don't know. Who knows? But
I didn't even think about that part. I think she just was actually already being followed. Like, I don't know that they would have needed a tip off from him.
I just wouldn't be surprised, especially since we find out dun, dun, dun. At the end of the Obits email, we actually get a signature and we do see that his name is Jim Milchick, editor of the Topeka Star.
I definitely missed that.
You did?
Yeah, I'm telling you, this was a lot. It's probably why I didn't read it the first time through.
That's so funny that you missed. That's the very last thing.
No, that's what earlier I was like, that's a stretch when you were like, M for Milchick? Could it be Milchick? I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't get that. I did not see that.
That's so funny. Oh, but yeah. So somehow, some way, don't know how, this guy is related, connected to Seth Milchick, and pretty much probably Seth is his inside man at Lumon, it's my guess. So there you have it. That's the end of the email portion.
Well, no. He does also reveal Lumon has sued other newspapers for libel.
Oh, right. That's before.
And he says, you may remember what happened with the Nashville Tribune. So now we know Lumon's in Kier, PE, wherever PE is. They're in Topeka, Kansas. They're in Nashville, Tennessee. Where else are they? They probably are in New York, where they have a major competitor.
Oh, yeah.
Did she mention where she grew up? Tacoma, Washington. Yeah. So she mentioned that she knew of Lumon growing up, but she didn't realize they were in Topeka. So they're probably in Washington too. Yeah. So all over the continental US and maybe Canada, if we're saying PE is Prince Edward Island, or it's a made up state. We don't know.
Also going back to that paragraph, this was interesting to me too. When they talked about that, they said, you may remember what happened with the Nashville Tribune when they printed what they thought was a well-sourced expose on Lumon's feeding tube devices. They got sued into oblivion and folded 6 months later. So I saw that part too. And I was like, feeding tube devices.
Feeding tube. Mhm.
Is that what was in Cobell's weird little shrine?
Yeah. Which then lends to the theory of it's something negative that she's holding on to, and she's playing the long game to throw Lumon under.
Revenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is all just adding into like what is going on, what is this all about? Still kind of a mystery, but definitely some breadcrumbs left in these correspondences that connect to what we've been seeing in the show.
Yeah.
And so like you said, Lumon clearly has a significant presence in a lot of places, and not just a presence, but like they have ingratiated themselves to the point that they have hooks in the public servants, police force, newspaper, media. So like they have inside people in all these places that are giving them the leg up. I mean, what are they, Amazon? I'm just kidding.
Right. The heck?
So, okay, so that now wraps up the email portion. So then they actually give us the macro data refiners orientation booklet, and it just says it's an instruction handbook for newly severed employees. Sidebar, before we even get into this, I just want to know, where was this book for Helly R? Why was this not the first thing she was handed after leaving the weird room where she's asked a bunch of questions? Here's your handbook. I know you have some questions about MDR. Sit at your desk and review it, and let us know if you have any further questions after that.
Right. It's very confusing because they reference a handbook a lot, but this is very clearly not the handbook that they're referencing, because they're referencing quotes and historical facts and all kinds of things that are not in this. This is just a basic, this is how you do your job in MDR specifically. So yeah, it's like, where is that other handbook, and how do they get it? When do they get it? Because like Helly doesn't get that either, but everyone's quoting it. So they get it at some point and read it, have access to it enough to memorize it. And then, like you said, this one, like, wouldn't this have cleared up some of her confusion initially? Like, why would you not give somebody their department's orientation booklet at their orientation?
Right. And as we're about to see, it's very, I mean, it's still vague, but for the innies, it at least gives a pretty step-by-step breakdown of this is what you're expected to do every day. This is how you do it. This is what it means. Like Helly got none of that. She's over here asking Dylan and Mark and all these other people, like, what the heck am I doing? And what does this mean? And what do you mean about the numbers are scary and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
This at least has it all kind of laid out. This is what how you're going to sort. I'm like, did they get rid of the orientation booklet at some point? Did they decide, we're not going to deal with that? I mean, maybe after this got out, they decided, that's just more materials that people can sneak out. So maybe we're not going to do that anymore. Maybe.
People deniability. We stopped using it. We don't know what you're talking about. We don't know what this one copy of this thing floating around is. We don't use that.
Yeah.
We don't have that. That's not a thing we have.
But yeah. Or if nothing else, have like, couldn't you program it into the computer to just show up on their first day? Like boop, 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 or something like, where it doesn't move from the office.
Yeah. That you have to go through before the first time you're booting up your computer or whatever.
Right. Like they could have a little, look at all this white wall space. They could have a little desk that's like new first day orientation desk. Here's all the things you need to look at.
I was going to say, especially because Sevi is definitely a rip on Clippy, like you said. So why isn't Sevi just popping up on the computer to explain things, like giving them a tutorial of the first time they go through?
It looks like you don't know what the numbers are. Looks like you don't understand sorting boxes. Like it's easily could have been that.
Looks like there's some scary numbers over in that corner. You should go check them out.
That actually would be perfect. Why don't they have Sebi? Sebi, the translucent dildo. Again, I'll never unsee it. So I'll just go ahead and read the first page and then we'll just go from there. It says, welcome to the Lumon family. Congratulations on your new job. All of us are thrilled you've become a part of Lumon Industries. From the humble beginnings of a small topical salve company to the world's largest leading pioneer in biotechnologies, Lumon has thrived thanks to workers like you. Welcome to the Lumon family. Meet Sebi.
So the way you're doing that also not only does make me think of Clippy, but it also makes me think Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah.
Explaining Amber and the fossils and all of that. And
my roommate just watched the first one the other day and I thought of that exact same thing. Yep. So funny, but it's very much that. And I just hear that voice as I read through it, probably because I've seen all those other mediums and experienced Clippy for all you old heads out there. I actually do remember booting up Microsoft Word and seeing the paperclip pop out of nowhere.
Or the kiddies who don't know, because we probably have some Gen Z Severance fans.
Maybe we do. Hi, Gen Zers.
Clippy was a pop-up help tool for Microsoft Word that would pop up thinking you needed help when you didn't need help, and would offer you all sorts of suggestions that were not useful most of the time.
Sometimes it was like, it looks like you're trying to write a resume. It looks like you might be trying to do a form letter. Do you know how a form letter works? But most of the time, yeah, it was just a nuisance that popped up and you're like, go away, Clippy.
Yeah, you're like, Clippy, how do I get this to go away? And there was like not a way to make it not the default setting until they just like upgraded finally to not have them at all.
Yeah. So we go through the handbook. A lot of it is stuff that we have already somewhat been introduced to through the show, but there's some moments where it's like, a little more of an insight, deep dive. So like the first couple of pages, basically just like, this is what Lumon is. This is what it means to be severed. They describe the process of being severed. They restate the consent part of it. Like, hey, by the by, you consented to this. If you are reading this, you consented to being severed and having your brain bisected or whatever they call it. So it's kind of a restatement. You already signed your life away, so can't get mad at us. One thing that I thought was interesting on page 3, they talk about the procedure and they say the severance chip is implanted in the brain through a needle that is inserted via the back of the neck into the memory portion of the brain. The procedure is handled by a world-class medical staff directed by a fluoroscopy monitor, which allows for precision placement of the chip. Lies. Lies. First of all, we saw what happened with Helly for her procedure. They definitely drilled into the back of her head. They did not just shoot a needle into the back of her neck.
Yeah, it wasn't like the nail.
No,
it was.
They definitely in her skull. So I was like, okay, so are they doing that again to not freak people out? Basically, when I read that, I got a very OxyContin sales pitch vibes.
Dope sick vibes.
Like dope sick vibes, where everyone's kind of burying the lead on what's really going on. Like, oh yeah, it's just a little painless little thing. We shoot it through your neck and it just goes up into your brain and voila. It's so simple. It's nothing. Where it's like, actually, we're going to drill into your head.
Right.
We're going to shoot a thing into your brain that's going to bisect your memories. And then you're just going to have a hole in your head. And then even the fact that they say it's handled by a world-class medical staff, it was one guy and one lady looking at a monitor, and then your weird Mr. Milchek who's just in there taking pictures.
Right. And like you said, when we talked about that episode, there's no sterile nothing. She's in her regular clothes.
Zero sterile field.
The doctors have gloves on, but Milchek's in there just taking pictures. Like, you can't have a camera in an operating room, bro. Like, what? Yeah, it's amazing. No one has gotten an infection from this procedure.
Well, that we know of.
True.
So just when I read that, I was like, lies. These are lies.
Yeah.
I'm sure not the first and won't be the last, but I just thought that was funny. So they talk about refiners.
Refiner makes something pure, more usable, and more accessible. And they go on to talk about it could be the oil industry, the sugar industry, a refinery, whatever. But specifically at Lumon, you'll be removing impurities from data and reorganizing that data into its purest form. What? Doesn't make any sense. But they're like, you should take pride in knowing that you've been selected for your intellectual prowess, your vast intellectual prowess. This may seem like confusing work, but we chose you because you're smart.
So I just found it funny that the oil industry and the sugar industry are things that they reference. Notoriously terrible industries of work. Were notoriously terrible to their employees and or slaves. So I just thought that was kind of funny. It's like refinement in these industries doesn't exactly inspire positive imagery. I saw that and I was like, the oil industry, the sugar industry, Lord, the history of the sugar industry. Okay.
Yeah. They also say on this page that, you may be curious about the numbers, but knowing more about the numbers might quell your natural intuition. And since you have to follow your intuition to sort the numbers, they don't want to do that. So they purposely leave it vague for them, I guess.
Another thing I got off this page, and it just made me think about how they target who they put on the MDR team. Because they say we recognize in you both the intuition and emotional intelligence to perform those tasks quickly, efficiently, and most importantly, reliably. So maybe they are looking for people that are very high empath natured people that are so overwhelmed by their EQ that it's hard to function. So this would be an ideal setup for them and for whatever the work is that they're needing them to do. It's like, they'll be very keyed in. And if we just take away the component of them understanding the life outside this world, it's perfect.
Right.
Just a thought. So they talk about, how do I know what to work on? You know, what do I do with these numbers? A lot of this is stuff that we've already kind of gotten in the show. They talk about the feelings that you get with the numbers. And I think we hinted on this when we talked in episode 1 or 2 about the boxes and the way that they're sorted in the boxes. But they do specifically mention it here. So I guess if you weren't picking up on that or didn't catch it,
the boxes are WO for numbers that elicit melancholy or despair, FC for numbers that elicit joy, gaiety, or ecstasy, DR for numbers that elicit fear, anxiety, or apprehension, and MA, this one's an interesting one. These numbers elicit rage or the desire to harm. So you're just sitting at your desk and now you want to kill somebody. Those are some numbers to group. What?
Yep. So then I guess when they talk about the numbers being scary, those must be the DR numbers.
Yeah.
Because they elicit fear. But I'm like, why isn't anyone talking about the rage numbers or the melancholy numbers? You might get sad.
Right. Well, I feel like we see Irving get some of the melancholy numbers with the goop and also some anxiety. I think there's a little bit of both. The music is different in the 2 different scenes where we see him get the goop, which I didn't notice until we started talking about it. So I think one of them is more melancholy and the other one is kind of more like anxious feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Like, right?
Yep.
So I think it's kind of like, what's that? Synesthesia. Maybe when he's like feeling the emotion, he's also seeing something, and maybe that's what the good is for him. You know how it's like some people like feel sounds or like taste colors or whatever.
Colors. Yep.
Yeah.
Could be. That makes sense. So if you don't remember from that episode when we talked about it initially, we put together that these 4 categories represent the 4 tempers. I was about to say vices. I was like, nope, that's not right. And the 4 are woe, frolic, dread, and malice, which is why they are WO, FC, DR, and MA.
Yeah.
I still have questions about how that works. I think I'll get to it because there's something that gets said later on when they talk about the process of sorting. So I'll wait till then. But the next page, on page 7, they say, how do I refine a number cluster? Sorting numbers is easy once you get the hang of this simple method. Follow along with the steps of sorting numbers on the following pages. And then at the bottom, it says, after you sort one set, it's easy to keep going until the whole file is complete. So this just made me think of a recent training situation I went through because I just read it and I was like, yeah, once you do this one, it'll get easier and you'll be able to do it all. I just thought to myself, I hate that's like a blah, blah thing that happens in trainings a lot where like, we're going to show you this one time. And don't worry, once you do it this one time, you'll get it. And it's like, will I? Will I get it?
Yeah, like, we're not going to show you again. Subtext, you better get it now. We're not showing you again.
So like recently, I just started a job. I went through training. The training only lasted 2 days, 4 hours each day. That's it. And then they basically sat me down at my desk and were like, okay, do your job. Don't worry. Once you do it, it'll get easier and you'll get faster and you'll be great at it. I did not get faster. It did not get easier. And I was not doing great. And so it's like weeks later, my, manager is coming up to me like, hey, so your time isn't ideally where it should be. In fact, it's maybe the slowest one. And we're going to have to figure out how to get you faster. So maybe we'll have you do a separate training with one of our lead photographers. So they do that. And the funny thing is that ended up giving me a lot more insight than what I got. Because in the initial training, it seemed very like, just give you the overview and then just get her to work.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt like when I read this in the manual. Yeah. Like, we're just going to give you this overview and then we're going to sit you down and get to work and just do it, And it's like, okay, it doesn't always sink in that quickly. I hate how trainings go like that sometimes. Sometimes they're very in depth and to some degree, you're not going to get the work until you do it. But it just seems like one of those, again, blah, blah, blah things where it's like, you'll get it. Don't worry. If it doesn't make sense, it's fine. It'll make sense. And it's like, you hope.
But conversely, I feel like this set of steps ends up getting more tedious than it needs to be because they don't just talk about refining the numbers. They start with turning on your computer and watch it boot up. There'll be letters on the screen and and then you'll get to see the Lumon logo. And it's like, really? You don't need to tell me how to turn on the computer. You need to tell me how to refine the numbers. Now,
here's a question though, because they are brand new babies. Do they understand computers?
But did they give them a knowledge of computers because they were going to be working on computers? Probably. Do they give them a knowledge of an on button? But like, come on.
I don't know. I don't know how. I'm just like,
Come on.
maybe they don't know how to do the computer.
I think by the time I got
mean,
this far in, I was just mad at this for being this long. I was like, come on. What, really? Number 2, now watch as the iconic logo of our beloved company spins onto the screen. This is all part of the
now that is silly.
boot up sequence.
Maybe they're just trying to make it exciting for them because really, when you think about it, they don't do anything for 8 hours a day. They're sitting in front of a screen. So maybe this is their way of trying to make it seem like, oh, and then you're going to see this cool graphic because you don't really know what good graphics are because you don't exist outside of, like, ooh, I don't know. But one thing I personally found interesting in the boot up screen, because I did zoom in and I did look at it. I don't know much about computer programming, but I do know that the coding that's in there lets us, the viewer, know. And if someone were smart enough or had those parts not be severed, would realize that that computer script is letting them know that they are being watched through their computer, because it shows that the codec and the speaker are engaged, which means they can hear you and they can see you and record video from your machine.
Yeah, that is a deep, deep dive. I never would have gotten.
Yeah, I know.
I'm looking at it now and I'm like, I don't know what any of this means.
I looked at it and I was like, I don't remember much from when I worked for a website company, but some of this is making sense. And I just looked at what was being like activated and what was showing it was on and wasn't on. When there was a 1, it's like there is one line of something being strict. So basically, what I was able to discern is like, okay, someone does have access to this. And there's a lot of things they don't have access to that it shows. The global positioning unit, I think it said, the GPU, was set to like a local global positioning, i.e. you can't figure out where you are in relation to the world. You only know where you are in relation to this building. Sorry.
That is wild. No, I mean, I'm glad you did it because I literally was like, okay. Okay, I'm glossing over this.
Which makes sense because if you're a worker, you're not going to think to look, but they're very clearly showing you what kind of environment this is about to be. You are going to be surveyed.
Well, maybe putting this part in the steps is to like hide things in plain sight, right? Like, say, you're going to see this. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
You're going to see this. Don't worry about it.
Yep. And you're like, okay, I won't worry about it. And of course, me, I'm like, I'm going to worry about it. Like, what is this? And I can't believe I actually did it too, because again, I'm like, I'm not a programmer. I don't know anything, but I was like, some of this stuff I do remember from my one job that I had working with websites. So I think that's what they're saying. For anyone who might be listening and is a computer programmer, if you do want to zoom in on this little screen, and tell us exactly what it is saying in the script language, feel free to do so. But I think I'm pretty right, at least about that part.
Yeah, it's on page 8 of the Lumon handbook.
So we'll move on. I just wanted to point that out. I was like, oh, it is hiding in plain sight. They're telling them exactly what's going on, but no one will ever know. So they go through each of these screens. Now the black screen was stupid with the blinking cursor. I was like, okay.
Right. It's like, you're going to see a blinking cursor. Press enter. But it also just makes me think of like, man, computers for real used to be like this. I remember.
You're right. Now, I will also say too that I could see where it's kind of like those manuals where you do have to really dumb it down for some people, because I could see where someone might get to this black screen and be like, oh no,
it's broken.
Is my screen broken? What do I do?
Yeah.
So somebody needed it to be this dumbed down. It's in the manual for some reason. The Rolodex is really funny too. Again, more nebulous timeline stuff like, what year is it? Who knows? We're using a virtual Rolodex. Okay.
I love that. Next step is like, to find your file, you're going to click up or down arrows to go through the Rolodex. And it's actually a Rolodex. And it just made me have fond memories of when I bought a Rolodex for our parody. We did
I knew you were going to say that.
The parody. And I was like, why did we write one? We wrote a line about a Rolodex. It was Drake's payphone. I mean, no, Drake's hotline bling and our payphone bling.
No, it was payphone ring.
Oh yeah. Payphone ring, because we can't afford a cell phone and you need to call us on the payphone. It was silly. It was fun. But we had a line about like flipping through people in a Rolodex, and we were like, where do we find a Rolodex? Do people still use them now?
Oh boy.
At the office supply.
We did find one.
I mean, somebody out there is still using them because they still provide them. It actually wasn't as hard to find one as I thought.
Unlike the payphone, which was impossible.
So we had to Photoshop payphones into our little music video because we couldn't find one anywhere. They recently removed the very last one from New York. I saw a story about. And I was just like, it seems like at this point, you would be saving one in major cities as like a historical
a mile
Yeah.
marker. Like, this was a thing once. Yeah, that's what I would think.
Right.
I actually saw one the other day and I almost turned around to look because I was like, was that a fully functional payphone? But I was like, Rodney should go home.
I have to see if the one at Randy's Donuts is still there because I feel like that's a historical landmark. They might keep their payphone too. I live by Randy's Donuts.
That would make sense.
Just
If you're not from Los Angeles,
Yeah.
by the way, Randy's Donuts is a landmark space in Los Angeles. You've
Yeah,
probably seen it
you've
in
seen
movies.
it in movies.
It's got a big old donut right on top. Anyway, sorry guys, we got sidetracked. So we're going through the steps. We're talking about refining the numbers.
Yeah. What's interesting though is there's 4 different sets of numbers, but there's 5 bins. And they still don't explain
What the actual 5 bins are.
what the 5 bins are, which number corresponds to which type of feeling, like they're not labeled. And maybe this is a little different, right? Because when we noticed the abbreviations for the 4 tempers, right?
Mhm.
We noticed them on these boxes, right? Isn't that where we got them
Yeah.
from?
So when the box opens and it shows it here, like a progress bar report will pull up in step 8. And within each box, it shows you how many numbers have been grouped into one of the 4 tempers.
Oh, I see that now. Yeah, and that has the 4. So each box carries all the 4.
Has that. But you don't know the difference between one box and another.
So then why are there 5 boxes? Yeah, so what is number 1's whoa versus number 5's whoa?
I don't know. Because that's the part that confused me, because it says if you attempt to put it in a box and then it turns out that isn't the correct bin it should have been in, then the numbers go back up into the screen and you have to try to resort it again.
Yeah, and it gives you a thumbs down and it says nope.
So this is the other thing I'm trying to figure out too, because you get a progress bar at the top that tells you the full file's completion status, but then you get progress bars underneath each box until each one of them are full. So do they all have to be at 100% for you to be at 100% on the file? Or because like one box is at 90%, one box is at 76, one box is at 54, one is at 95, one is at 16.
Yeah, but that math, hold on.
Time to do some math, y'all. What's the average?
Yeah,
I'll let you do it since you've got
blurry on what I'm looking at.
I see 90, 76, 54, 95, and 36.
36. I had 30. Okay. Divided by 5 boxes is about 70%. So that says 75 up there. So maybe the math's not right, but whatever. Yeah, I think it's the average.
So then I guess you do have to be at 100% for each folder before you're at 100% completion. But I'm still very confused about, like, they talk about how not all the files will all get complete by the quota deadline and how most of them actually don't get complete. And so I guess my question is, do you not get a new file until the quota timeline hits? Or if you have too many failures, is it like, okay, time to move on to a new file because this ain't working? Like, I'm trying to figure out if most of them don't get to 100% completion by their deadline, then they must be doing multiple files within that time period. But if they're already failing them, then what's the...
Well, because maybe each box is something that they're blowing up. And so even if they don't do 100%, they're still doing good stuff. Or maybe if they cut them off, right? If they let them work until they're done, maybe they'll do less though. There's no motivation to get faster if you can just take
I'm wondering if it's about speed or if it's about accuracy.
It's about efficiency, right? Because it has to be about accuracy. It won't let them be wrong. But if they're cutting them off by time, then they have to get more efficient to do more. Like, they can't just be faster and be wrong.
So then let's say you have a quarterly quota deadline. So by the end of the quarter, whatever your file status is at is what it's at.
Yeah. And I don't think they work on one file per quarter.
That's what I was trying to figure out. Do they have multiple files they're working on?
Yeah, I think not at the same time. I think they have a certain amount of time to do the current file they're given. And they don't know the next workday if they're going to, when they go through their Rolodex, they don't know if they're going to get the same file that they started or if they're going to get a new file. But then at the end of the quarter, because the perk is like based on
that makes more sense to me.
The most across all their files gets that.
Because that's what I was trying to figure out. It's like, okay, if the perks and the incentives are set up that way, then how does Dylan have so many if you're only doing one file until whatever the deadline is?
Oh, yeah, no. I know. I think it's multiple. They might be doing a different one each day, honestly. And And like you said, if it is more about accuracy, maybe they don't care. Like, okay, maybe you only sorted one of your 5 bins today, but that one sorted bin help us bring down whatever. We don't know what they're doing with those numbers.
Sure don't.
So whatever. Now we're just
Blowing
gonna
up
help
trucks
you
and stuff.
go on to another one. And they might be cycling those files through all the 4 MDR people. Because they also mentioned that the job can't be done without 4 people. So maybe they all have better intuition for the different types.
Does each person represent a temper?
Well, that's what I was
like,
thinking.
is Irving red and is Dylan malice? So then who would be frivolity? Oh, I guess it would be Helly, I guess. Because Mark would be whoa, right? Him sad all the time.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like maybe they're all more in tuned with one over the other ones. They have the ability to all do all of them, right?
But someone's going to have more of a propensity than the other.
Yeah, Dylan wouldn't have so many caricature portraits.
It makes more sense to me too with Petey in the mix than Helly, because Helly is just kind of out there. But Petey clearly made sense in the frivolity chair, right?
Yeah.
He was always Mr. Good Times, yuck yucks. We're making jokes, we're laughing, we're having fun. He definitely seemed more of the chipper of the 4 when it was the 4 of them. I don't know why that didn't occur to me till now.
But moral of the story is, just like the in-person explanations, this doesn't make it any more clear.
Maybe for someone out there it does.
I mean, maybe that's also why they stopped giving this to them. They're like, you know what? We realize this doesn't make a damn difference. They just have to fill it out until they get it.
You're right.
Anyway, the handbook finishes on the numbers, and then it just starts going into like some rules and regulations. So the first one is the office dress code. Like Peg mentioned earlier, the Lumon neutrals. All clothing is to be monochromatic and solid in color. Permitted colors are black, white, navy, gray, and pastels. All attire is to be free of labels, as labels will activate the detectors placed in entry and exit points of the severed floor. So it vaguely mentioning the code detectors. You mentioned the dress code in one of our previous podcasts.
Yes, I think the last one.
But this is the first time we're actually seeing the dress code, except that Helly doesn't really wear pastels always. She does wear solid colors, but sometimes she's pretty bright.
That's what is interesting to me, because I'm like, I've noticed on a number of occasions, I was like, I don't think this color would qualify as a pastel.
Yeah, but I didn't think anything of it because for me, this is the first time I'm hearing of a dress code. So I'm like, is there a dress code other than wear office clothes?
I don't remember if the first time through, if I caught on to it. I think it was very clear to me the first time through that she dressed a little more ostentatiously in color than the other workers did. So she definitely stood out. And I don't remember if from reading the letter the first time through, if I had it in my head this time through of like, oh yeah, it's pretty much like a blue scale, gray scale type of dress code. But she's never quite all the way in on that. So there's been a couple times where she's done it, but she definitely wears yellows. She wore that kind of copper colored shirt in one of the episodes, which I thought that was interesting too. I'm trying to think of another color I've seen her in, but it's like she'll always be kind of like halfway compliant. Like she'll have a blue skirt or a top or something that's in that permitted colors, but then she'll have one thing that isn't.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder if it's another clue about her outie, right? Because Helly's not choosing her clothes. Her outie is choosing clothes.
True.
So, and we know, right, that they don't do this procedure that Peg described in this letter anymore. Like they come to work in the clothes that they're going to wear. They're not changing once they get there. So it's like, okay, who is her outie and why is she not worried about breaking this particular rule? The next page, I mean, there's not really much on the dress code.
Health and hygiene. This just brings me back to the soap again.
Yeah, I was like reading for stuff about the soap because I'm like, why are you obsessed with the soap? I'll let you get into it because I don't see anything here that makes me like, the Lumon soap.
Okay, here's what I'll tell you, because I do remember this from the first time I read through it. I just remember, and I have to look it up, but I remember there being some kind of something where people were worried about being brainwashed through soap. I have to look it up because I don't remember what it is. I won't take the time if it doesn't come up. But this made me think of like, are there things that, because what's weird about it is they get very specific about how many times a day you should wash your hands, how thoroughly you should wash your hands. And one could easily read it as, oh, just be clean and healthy. We just want everyone to have good hygiene. But it could also be like, these are little things that kind of help keep your chip compliant or help keep you compliant while you're here.
stood out to me about that was more so that they're saying it's imperative to keep you guys healthy. And that to me makes me more concerned about what else is going on the severed floor and what else is happening. Like, what are all the jobs that are being done there? Because that is continued in the next section about the interdepartment fraternization, where they're saying the main reason for that is to prevent diseases and pathogens from spreading between employees. So I'm like, what are they concerned about? That's really sketchy that they're that concerned about disease spreading across the company.
I don't think they are. That's what's funny.
I mean, I think them baby goats is carrying stuff.
Oh, Lord.
And they need, if you encounter a goat, you better be washing your hands before you touch anything else.
I wished I could remember where I heard it. I don't know if it was some kind of science fiction thing, but I just remembered there's something in my pop cultural brain that soap was being used for brainwashing. I don't remember what it is. If anyone out there maybe knows what I'm talking about, help me out. The soap thing, that might just be me. That may have nothing to do with anything, but I just think there's something in that soap. There's something to that soap. I don't know what else to say. They talk about the wellness center, which I found interesting that it is brought up in the handbook, that is something that's afforded to the workers.
Yeah, and it's can request it, but we've never seen that.
Sure haven't.
Just that they get sent there.
I don't know if there's much else. They talk about obviously not communicating with your outie. Oh, work incidents. Is this where they talk about?
Yeah. So here at Lumon, we do everything we can to ensure the safety of our workers, but unfortunately, incidents in the workplace can happen. If this does occur, your outie will receive a notice explaining the nature of the incident. Discipline will be administered to match the seriousness of the incident. So it's like, wait a minute, discipline will be administered, but you're talking about incidents like, oh, you're just going to be notified. Like they start talking about it like it's accidents, but then why is there discipline if it's an accident?
Yep.
Kind of thing. And we know the notes that we've seen the outies get, it definitely is always like, oops, clumsy accident happened.
Right. Obviously, this is something that's going to the innies. Do the outies get something similar, or are they just not given any indication about like, oh, if something happens at work, we'll just let you know what happened? Because if I saw this that said, discipline will be administered to match the seriousness of the incident, I'd have questions.
Exactly.
What do you mean discipline? What is that in reference to? Are you talking about getting released from work with no pay or being put on like administrative leave? Or are you talking about physical stuff? Like, I would want some clarity on what that means, but I'm sure that can't be something they're telling the outies.
Yeah. Or I'd be like, it says, you're doing everything to ensure our safety. So what is, if somebody gets hurt, what is the discipline? Are you saying that I might get hurt because of something another worker did and they'll be disciplined? Like, what are you talking about? Incident.
Yeah.
Or do you mean just like, you let me know if I trip over an extension cord or something? Like, what are you talking about? Doesn't make sense.
Oh.
But after that, they talk about the incentives, which we had figured out what all of those are before. But just to recap, 10% complete, you get a pencil eraser. 25% you get a finger trap. 75% you get the music dance experience. And then 100% is the caricature portrait. But a bonus is a refiner who performs exemplary work may be designated refiner of the quarter by their department chief. And this individual receives a compensatory waffle party. So the melon bar that comes up is kind of just like for events. It's not like a perk that they earn. So we got the melon bar party for the retirement party.
And the egg cart.
Yeah. The egg bar.
Have they shown the egg bar yet?
No.
Well, that's coming.
You keep talking about it, but I don't remember it. So I know we haven't seen it in the rewatch yet.
Well, it's coming.
It's coming. But yeah, we've seen the melon bar party twice now, but they must change because Peggy says she got a melon bar party for completing her file, but she's supposed to get a caricature portrait for that.
Incorrect. They may have changed it. That's true. It's funny because she talks about the melon party, going back to that, and she talks about it being like an infantilizing, a silly thing to do. But the first thing I thought of was like, when I'm at work, and it's even happened with my new job, and like they're trying to like rally us and be like, oh, you guys, we got close to our goal, we're getting closer to our goal, or we made it, we ordered Chipotle burritos for everybody, we ordered Mediterranean food. Like, it's always a food incentive. And the funny thing is, it works. Like, people get real excited when free food is in the building, and it seems so simple when you think about it this way. I mean, melons and stuff are definitely not that exciting, but again, free food. And we already know that break room isn't giving them much. So they're probably like,
Right.
melons, eggs, perfect. This is a good day. We're getting more than raisins and a pizza slice. Sounds good.
Funny.
But yeah, that waffle party, coveted. And I'm still wanting to know what the glass etching that Mark got is about. There's still no
Yeah.
indication, even in this manual, about any instances where
What
that
it is.
might be.
Yeah. And they haven't ever revisited. We just know it's something that they gave them. We don't know why.
Yep.
So then the handbook ends with the Lumon 9 core principles. So we've heard them before, but they are vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, and wiles. Wiles. I can't read the list though.
Without saying it. You have been
No
doing
way.
that.
Eco Bell does it now. She's like, wiles, yes, wiles. That's what I'll do. But Sevi, I was about to say Clippy, points out that the emphasis is on good social skills because we are not just a team, we are a community. One could even say a family.
So again, I guess this makes sense why they have to keep them somewhat socially engaged, because they are trying to keep up this Kier-centered facade of social community, family, business, even though they do everything to keep them from being a community. Like,
my behaviorist brain makes me wonder why there aren't any group contingency perks. And I mean, to an extent, there is, like, because everyone gets to enjoy the music dance experience, but there's not really any built in, like, if you help your teammate, this is what you do. Although they talk about it as if, like, we all need to reach this, but there's not really any reinforcement in place for that. It's very individualized reinforcement.
True.
I just thought that was interesting.
I mean, I guess the helping each other part is kind of tricky, because it's like, is there a way you can help someone else with their work? Like, is it all based on just your perception? Because if it is, then you can't have someone else see something that you can, right?
Well, and I don't know, like when Helly saw her first numbers, Irv and Dylan kind of gathered around her and helped walk her through it. So I don't know if maybe, like, let's say you finished your file early, if there was a way that you could help someone with theirs. I don't know. Not quite sure. But I wonder too, like, do they just start another file if they finish early, or do they get to go home early? Because Dylan one day stayed late to complete a file. Like, he was almost done with one. So I wonder if you could do the opposite. Can you leave early?
I mean, a company's always going to let you work more,
right?
Not necessarily less. And that again makes me wonder too about, like, do they get PTO? Like, do they get personal time off, or is it just weekends, or how does that work? Like, do you just call up Milchek and be like, I'm taking a vacation?
Well, I think probably like the same way you call out sick. You call Milchek to call out sick, but they probably have PTO, and the poor Innie just doesn't get to experience it. They get to come back with a tan, and they're like, I feel rested, and I'm
really well rested.
Audi went to Hawaii or something.
Oh boy,
that's sad.
Yeah. Well, guys, this is the Lexington Letter bonus episode. It's like there's a lot and not a lot. Like you were saying, like it covers and unfolds a lot. I feel like more came from the letters than the handbook.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if the handbook may become more clear if there are clues further down the line.
Well, Peggy told Peg to distribute it because there's answers if you look for them. Girl, I don't know what the answers are. Maybe I don't know what the questions are first. Questions, but I don't know what the answers are. I don't know if distributing that would do anything. It's so comical too that I feel like, let's say Peg was able to get out and get it published somewhere. I feel like people would be like, this has got to be a made up version or something, a decoy for the real thing, because Lumon doesn't want us to know their top secret stuff that they're working on, because why would the employees not know what numbers they're working on? Or, you know what I mean? It seems fake. It seems fake.
That's what, and I remembered that line in the letter too. And I was just like, man, what, like you said, what is the question? What are the answers? Like, how do you know what questions to ask? I mean, and this is my second time reading it through.
Yeah. Well, we hope you enjoyed the bonus episode. When you get a chance, if you could be so kind as to rate us, review us, contact us with your questions and your theories, especially the coding thing.
Oh yeah, please. Calling all computer software engineers, etc.
Let us know what is on that page. It's page 8 of the Macro Data Refiners Orientation booklet. And you can still get the book on Apple Books, the booklet and the Lexington Letter. Man, I'm tired, guys. Sorry.
Yes, thank you guys for joining us again today for this bonus episode. This has been the UUR, and remember, Sebi says, if you work hard and respect your coworkers, your experience at Lumon will be very rewarding.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the UUR with me, Kali Thomas, and my co-host, Rodnesha Green. If you've got questions for us, want to talk theories, share memes, or just connect, follow us at the UUR Pod on Blue Sky and Threads. Or you can email us at theuurpod@gmail.com. We can't wait to see the UUR. Bye!